Welcome to another episode of the Wisco Fanatics Show, where we cover the Packers, Bucks, Brewers, and Badgers basketball and football teams from an optimistic and realistic perspective.
Welcome back to another Wisco Fanatics Wednesday. I am rolling solo today. Jake will be rolling solo tomorrow. And what Jake and I are going to be doing today and tomorrow is talking about what it means to us to be optimistic and realistic, why we decided to go this route with our content focus and with our mentality, with our content, with just the way that we are. Jake and I have talked pretty at length over the years that we've been doing it this way, that it's also helped us grow as people. So, just a lot of stuff has resonated with us, whether it's books that we've read, interviews that we've listened to from our favorite players, podcasts, interviews with people that we look up to as far as like role model type people. It's something that we think is really important and something that we wanted to pass on to those that listen to our show, that watch our show, that follow along with our content on why we are the way that we are. So for me, that comes down to a handful of different subjects, all on the same sort of umbrella, I guess. And it's a handful of different parts that I'm going to break it up into, with like thinking habits, thinking traps, thinking better, what it really means on like a definition level, how we handle losses, perceived failures, rebuilds, and then just our mindset and mentality. So just the way that we're thinking about this is, who are you when your team loses? Are you somebody that just wants to complain, or is it somebody that wants to learn? We believe that your character isn't shown by what you say that you believe, but it's by how you act. The way that we talk about sports and our teams says a lot about how we think about life itself, not just sports. And a big reason why Jake and I made this shift a few years ago is that we believe that mental health is about improving your ability to regulate your emotions, manage your thoughts, behave in a more positive manner, regardless of the circumstances. And being a sports fan gives you a very large opportunity to work on that part of your mental health. So for part one, for me, the way that fans think in general, and Jake and I appreciate the following that we have, and we recognize that we could have done more clickbaity type stuff to grow faster, and we don't want that. We want quality over quantity. We don't want to have average thinking going on with the people who want to interact with us. We understand that sports can absolutely expose the way that people think, and it really exposes people's character, and that's not the kind of people that we want around us. So a lot of times there's fans that are only happy if the team wins the championship. And there's a flaw with that line of thinking. Jake and I agree with this. I mean, only one team out of every league wins a championship every season. The playoffs themselves, even if you're expecting a deep playoff run from your team, that's a small part of the season. Like, we're in the middle of baseball season right now. Baseball starts at the end of March and goes until the end of September. We're talking a 6-month baseball season and then 1 month of playoffs. It's such a small part of the season that we have worked towards wanting to be able to enjoy the ride and not just arriving at the destination. We don't want to be the people that are like, yeah, it's great that the Brewers had the best record in baseball right now, but I'm not going to be happy until they win a World Series. It's such a rare occurrence for a team to win a World Series that shouldn't be the only time that you're going to be happy, because if the Brewers win the World Series in October, that you're going to go back to August and still have spent that time unhappy because you don't know what's going to happen in the future. So why spend this entire time unhappy when you don't know what's going to happen in the future, and you're betting all of your happiness on that event that you still can't go back in time and make yourself happy for that whole season? Another big part of this with thinking habits and some of the problems with them is moving out of the survival mindset that wants to find and assign blame. And this can be absolutely 100% applied to life, but it is a super easy thing to recognize when it comes to sports. And it's something that comes with a scapegoat mentality that one play or one player or refs control the outcome of games. It's a scapegoat mentality that we don't participate in. That like, oh well, if this one thing wouldn't have happened, our team would have won. Or if the refs hadn't called this foul, this game wouldn't have happened. Like it's stuff like that that we believe that in the totality of the game, there are other things that could have happened that make that part of the game a non-issue. Looking at just how humans are, human nature, Dr. Joe Dispenza reported that people spend up to 70% of their time anticipating negative outcomes. And that's what I'm talking about when I say the playoffs are such a small part of a season. And even if you look at the playoffs being the bigger weight part of a season, and spending 70% of your time anticipating a negative outcome, hoping that the good thing happens, and if it doesn't, you've spent 100% of your time unhappy. And if you spend 70% of your time anticipating something bad happening and your team wins it all, you've still only spent 30% of your time happy. Have to be able to enjoy that 70%. We get that negative thoughts happen. Nobody's immune to them. Jake and I are not immune to them, but being able to interject after a negative thought before it becomes a negative action, like jumping on Facebook to be like, oh, this sucks, we need to cut this guy, trade him, fire the coach, all that after singular events, that's not something that we do. We don't live to make those knee-jerk reactions. And we believe that when people see overwhelmingly cumulative negativity, that just becomes what they're used to seeing, and that becomes who they are. And that's absolutely not what Jake and I want for us, for our families, for our followers, for our content. And unfortunately, with that negative thought impulse, a lot of times comes confirmation bias. You become essentially what you constantly focus on. So if you're constantly thinking about what went wrong, thinking negatively, you're naturally going to place that same judgment on yourself and those around you. And again, that's not the kind of stuff that we want around us. The constant dissatisfaction is just a step on the path to just being miserable. And again, those aren't the kind of people that we want around. We don't want people that have to try to find the difficulty in every possibility instead of finding possibilities in difficulties. A great example is that last week it was reported that Brandon Woodruff might not be done for the season and that he's going to have a chance to start throwing and maybe make a return sometime this season. And you can tell the people who are excited and are going to be like, hey, if it happens, great, we want the best for Woodruff. And then you can always see that there's always going to be people who jump in and go, he's never going to come back, this is not happening. And it's like, why would it even be reported as a possibility if it wasn't happening? It's literally happening as a possibility. That's not the kind of mindset that we want around us. Again, our families, our content, ourselves. People waiting around always for the perfect day, the perfect circumstances, instead of, like I just said, being able to see the possibilities. This nothing is good enough mentality where you're essentially saying, yeah, this is great, but how is it going to go bad? Yeah, it's great that this person is playing well, but how long until their next injury? How can I be unhappy with how he got here? Yeah, it's great that he's finally playing good now, but he's been overpaid for 2 seasons. Like that kind of stuff, that's just not what we want to be around, and it's not how we want to act and carry ourselves. Part 2 is thinking traps. So one thing with small sample sizes comes catastrophizing in reaction to those small sample sizes. Baseball is a great example. That a good week in baseball does not mean that somebody's winning an MVP, and a bad week in baseball, a slump, even a bad month in baseball, does not define a player's identity. Catastrophizing after one series or a game loss, like this absolutely happened in our comment section after the Brewers got swept by the Padres. All of the comments that the Padres swept the Brewers and they were going to face the Dodgers for a 4-game series, a whole bunch of, oh, Cubs are going to be in first place by Sunday. Cubs are going to be in first place by Sunday. Oh, here we go. We're going to be losing the division now. People, relax. Let the games actually play out. The Brewers ended up taking 3 or 4 from the Dodgers. The Cubs are still nowhere near first place. failure is not permanent. Also, like it, obviously it course corrected right after that, and losing has no bearing on the future. Aside from what you assign to it. So a big thing with us is that we believe that failure does not have a bearing on the future, outside of what you can learn from it. So we have definitely had a lot of conversations about winning and learning versus winning and losing. We also are we really don't deal in absolutes a lot. I mean, really at all. And if we do, it's mostly from a point of just talking from confidence or boldness, and we will say that. We don't do the dealing in absolute, the binary perspectives, the essentially saying that nothing important is unknown. That there's no other information that can possibly be added to this, that just the way that we're saying is the way that it goes. Because if that were the case, then there'd be no point in having the games played. There'd be no point in watching the games. If you knew what was going to happen, there'd be no point. The real versus imaginary, this team isn't going anywhere type stuff, that type of binary thought process, and putting yourself through a negative scenario before it even happens. This weird trying to, for some reason, put the negative scenario already in your brain so that you can either, one, say I told you so, like, ooh, I told you the Brewers weren't going to win the World Series. So are 29 other teams. Like, one team out of 30 wins it. 29 teams are losing it. It's not a bold statement to say, oh, the Brewers aren't going to win the World Series. Literally one team is going to. It could be for people to just feel like they need to let themselves down easily, like, oh, I'm going to prepare for the Brewers to lose in the first round of the playoffs, so that it doesn't hit you as hard if it happens, or being able to say, like, oh, I told you this was going to happen, so that you can remove yourself from identifying with it. Like, oh, I told you that this bad thing was going to happen to the team that I love. Like, that type of fandom is not what we want for our following, for ourselves, and for our content. That's just not how we want to operate. There is absolutely a lot of things we've talked about with hindsight and, like, the outcome bias, where a lot of people are naturally driven to judge decisions based on the outcome rather than the thought process behind the decisions that were made. We definitely want to make sure that we're looking at things like, at the time that a decision was made, was it a good decision? Versus stuff like just saying that, like, that was a terrible decision, how could you do that dumb thing? Or if something does work out, then just saying, well, yeah, it was obvious that was the good thing to do. And still not giving any credit to the decision makers at the time that a decision was made. One really big example of things that we do with this, with the benefit of hindsight, is like, let's just say the Brewers are on the road and we're in the top of the ninth of a game, and somebody hits a clutch home run to put the Brewers in a lead, and they end up losing in the bottom of the ninth. Just say something like that. Just because they ended up losing that game doesn't mean that the thing that happened in the top of the ninth inning wasn't a clutch play. It was still clutch at the time that it happened. The end result not working out is still, it doesn't take bearing away from what happened before that. It takes away some of the weight of it, and you can't be as excited about it because the outcome didn't work out. But there's still positive takeaways and stuff like that. Also, when you're getting into hindsight and something doesn't work, as, say, like a draft pick doesn't work out, you can still look at it and be able to be objectively and say, hey, it didn't work out, but I understand why it was decided that way. And if things do work out and it didn't look like it was going to at first, or even if it did, it's just being able to say, hey, that was a great decision. Another thing that definitely happens a lot, and we want to make sure that we don't ever fall into this trap, is only acknowledging bad outcomes with the benefit of hindsight. Personally, I believe that's just intellectually dishonest. I think you have to at least be able to give credit where it's due as well. Like, if you don't like a general manager of a team, you can't only criticize his bad decisions and never give him credit for the good ones. The next step from that is to acknowledge that a decision was made, whether it worked out or not, and be able to say that it was made with a logical and a reasonable thought process. Another thing, and you'll hear Jake and I will definitely acknowledge this when we talk in our shows, is people not being able to produce counter arguments to their own points. It's called my side bias, to basically only be able to think about things that would fit your perspective, and only being able to produce counter arguments to somebody with a opposing idea. You will absolutely hear Jake and myself say something and acknowledge the other perspective. We are absolutely 100% open to exploring other perspectives. That's something we actually try to do ourselves to make sure that what we're saying, what we're thinking, is sound. A really easy example of how to judge perspective is to just think about somebody who has their hand in a pot of super hot water and somebody who has their hand in a pot of ice water, both going to touch a bowl of room temperature water. The perspective on that water in the middle is going to be completely different to each of those two people. There are multiple perspectives to be had in everything. And we acknowledge those alternate ones when we react to and share our perceptions. We understand that not everybody's going to think the way that we do. We also understand that not everything that we're going to say we are interpreting is 100% factual, because a lot of that interpretation is in the eye of the beholder, and we have chosen to take our perspective from a more optimistic point of view because it's more beneficial to our mental health. Part 3 of this is thinking better. One thing that Jake and I are absolutely in pursuit of, whether it be in regards to sports, different sports, whether it be in terms of mindfulness or intelligence or mental health, is we want to be active learners. Jake gives me credit all the time for knowing more about baseball than he does, and I've worked on that. Like, I've tried to be able to interpret stats better. I've listened to books about it. I've read books about it, to be able to understand some of the ins and outs better. Jake played football way longer than I did. He understands the X's and O's and the terminology of it better than I do. But Jake and I push each other in that aspect of trying to learn things to be better. You will never hear us claim to know everything about anything. There's nothing that we are going to know everything that there is to know. There's always going to be somebody else that can teach us something. And Jake and I, we always want to learn stuff about sports, like I said. Mindfulness, mental health, all kinds of stuff. We also believe that learning more about sports helps us expand our thought processes. Understanding that our knowledge is judged by the questions that we ask that are kind of at the edge of our knowledge. That's something that just being able to ask good questions is something that we pride ourselves on. To be able to say, hey, is that a good question? Is that something we should talk about on a Wednesday show or a Tuesday show for the Packers? Thinking deeper, not just taking the easy way out and running with the first thought that comes into our head. We are strong advocates for critical thinking and not knee-jerk reactions. That's why we don't post after every single game the minute that a game ends. We're not recording post-game shows to every single game. We like to kind of sit back on stuff. We take our notes as the games go on, and then we post our notes for the Brewers at least at the end of every series. We are careful with the way that we phrase and post what we interpret from games as they happen. John F. Kennedy said that too often we enjoy the comfort of opinion without the discomfort of thought. And we really strongly oppose the knee-jerk reaction. Now, in a smaller setting or a different type of takeaway, like something Again, something smaller, like Jacob Mizorowski throwing a 104.5 mile an hour pitch. That's something you might see us knee-jerk react to, because that's not something like we're saying that because Jacob Mizorowski threw a 104 mile an hour pitch that the Brewers are winning the World Series. If we're posting something that's as it's happening, that's breaking, a reaction to a trade, it's either going to be very level-headed or it's going to have thought baked into it. And it's not going to be just, oh, this happened, this sucks. This happened, we're winning it all. We don't do that. We also understand that the way that we are approaching this and the way that we're going about it is not for everyone. It might make us grow slower than other sports shows. And we don't want to be a part of the group think of, well, I'm not the only person saying this, that this person needs to be traded or fired, so it's got to be right. We don't subscribe to that. That is not a reason for validity just because a group of people are saying it. Now, experts on the subject, analysts, whatever you want to say, there's people whose opinion carry a little bit more weight, but if we're just talking the collective of people who are commenting under the sports page of the Green Bay Packers saying that Matt LaFleur needs to be fired because the Packers lost to the Bears in Week 5, I'm not going by a comment section as a group of people that I'm going to say that is holds a ton of validity. For me, it's going to be about facts and reasoning. Like, if there's reasons that happened, sure. But just because other people are saying something doesn't make it a valid point. Also with opinions, predictions, like Jake and I are going to be doing stat predictions soon. And, we're going to be saying these things before week 1 is even here. And things are going to happen during the season that are going to throw our projections way off. And we understand that there needs to be course correction when we are saying things. Same could go for record predictions, things like that. We have to be able to acknowledge old opinions and adjust them when new evidence is presented. Obviously, if we say that the Bucks are going to win 50 games this year and Tyler Hero has an injury, we need to be able to adjust and say, hey, Tyler Hero not being on this team means that I think the Brewers are going to, or the Bucks are going to win 5 less games this year. Stuff like that. We don't want to cling to, something that we said in 2023 just out of intellectual stubbornness because we're standing by something we said. If there's something we said previously and it needs to be adjusted, we will say, hey, I was wrong on that date. Other things have happened since then. That's why I've changed my, perception. Being able to admit when you're wrong, understanding that course correction is necessary. The analogy that I would use is not being able to adjust your opinion would be like a sailor being on the water and never steering the boat. You have to be able to course correct. Now, for me, going into the next section, being about optimistic and realistic. When we started out, we were like, hey, we're gonna be optimistic. We're gonna be an optimistic Wisconsin sports show. It's not something that anybody is doing. There's plenty of knee-jerk. There's plenty of whining. God knows there's plenty of whining when it comes to social media and sports. There's tons of whining out there. We did not want to be part of that. So we want to be able to think positively without just being like, oh, our team won, we're winning it all, and doing the obnoxious, boastful, not giving credit to opponents ever type thing, because all of the teams that we cheer for aren't winning. The Bucks aren't going 82-0, the Packers aren't going 17-0, the Brewers aren't going 162-0, and all 5 teams that we cover aren't winning the championship every single season. So we know that that's unrealistic. So when we get to the optimistic and the realistic, what we're saying is that it's a commitment from us to find positive takeaways. The realistic part of it also means that choosing positivity doesn't mean that we're blind to truths. That, if a player is struggling, we're not saying, oh, well, he's going to turn it around and he's going to be this much better by this date just because we're thinking positively. That's not what we're doing. We're acknowledging that there are multiple truths in some things and not everything's going to be perfect. But being able to focus on things that are true with a positive outlook on it, we are choosing the truth that benefits our mental health and the perception of that is also realistic. So yes, there can be truth in our team lost, but that's only a partial truth, because there is a whole truth that says we lost and we learned from it. That's a full truth. Being able to say that you learned something from a loss about what you need to improve, where your roster needs to be changed, if it is a head coaching change, things like that. Being able to be realistic about that without just being like, fire everybody, trade everybody, like that. Being able to remain, like I said, level-headed before. And there is a difference, and it's something we have absolutely had people say to us is, oh, you're just giving moral victories. And there's a difference between positive takeaways and moral victories. A moral victory is, well, we would have won if this would have happened. Or, yeah, you beat us, but you're not going to win at all. That is a moral victory, stuff like that. Those live in the past. A positive takeaway is a noteworthy building block that you can use for the future. And with that comes a growth-focused mindset, not a past-focused, shrinking moral victory just to try to be able to kind of make yourself feel better about something not going the way that you wanted it to. Being able to say, yes, it didn't work out. We know we need to do this. We need to get better in this area. Jake and I take this approach with our content. When we try stuff and it doesn't work the way that we hoped it would, we say, okay, we need to adjust. Our Wednesday shows are a huge example of that, where our Brewers game recaps were taking like an hour per show, and people weren't staying for that last 15 minutes where we're talking about other stuff that's more contextually important than just the game recaps. So we shifted the game recaps to text. Those have been doing great, and now it frees us up on Wednesdays to have conversations like the one that we're having today about what it means to us to be optimistic and realistic. Something that Jake is big on, you're going to hear him talk about it on his part of this show, is he's going to talk about gratitude. And being able to trade expectations for appreciations is a huge, huge way that you can improve your perception, your mental health. Being able to improve by just saying that, hey, I'm only going to be happy if the thing that I expect to happen, like a championship or this record and a deep playoff run or making the playoffs with a young roster, I'm only going to be happy if that expectation happens, versus being like, I'm really having a lot of fun watching the Brewers this year, regardless of what happens in October. I'm having fun today and being in that present. That brings me to my next section, which is handling losses, handling perceived failures, handling rebuilds, because this is something we're going through with the Bucks. The ability to remain positive and level-headed isn't done only after losses. It's done before the games start. And this is something that, like I said, we are continually working on. One thing that has kind of come along with this a lot is that we recognize that the other teams have good players and they have a will to win and the same goals to win a championship. And to improve so that you can win a championship in the future. It's something that we've worked hard on, where once in a while it feels gross, but we have to give credit to our rivals because they have some good players. Being able to do that while still wanting to win, that's a mentality shift versus just saying all your players suck because I don't like them. And all of our players are the best because I like them, except for the one guy who messed up that one time and now I'm going to hate him forever. That's not us. That's not how we operate. We also understand that as sports fans and podcasters that we don't control the outcomes. We are here to interpret them. And we want to interpret them in a way that makes us feel good about the way that we are essentially passing things on to other people. Because we recognize that even though we don't have 1 million followers, we are getting very close to 10,000. And if you go across all the apps, we have over 10,000 people who follow us and see our content. We have people that don't follow us that see our content. We can see how many people see our content. And we want to be able to feel good that what we are putting on people's social media feeds is stuff that's not going to make them feel shitty about themselves. That is not who we are, what we want for ourselves, for our followers, for our families, for our content, for the world. That's not the kind of stuff that we want to be putting out. Like I said, Jake and I being active learners, it helps us expand our thought process. And again, it's not just learning about sports, but learning about the way that we can affect the way that we think. Understanding that, again, that what we think and what we say is not the only way to perceive things. Like, there are people who know more about us than every team that we cover. It's part of reality. Another part of accepting reality, and where the realistic part comes in, is being able to accept losing. Everybody loses. There's literally nobody who is going 162 this baseball season. There's nobody that's going to go, I mean, it's possible in football, but, I mean, nobody's really gone a full undefeated season in a long time. And the last time it happened, they lost in the Super Bowl. Disappointment. It's real. It's real to be disappointed sometimes. The Bucks kind of never having a fully healthy postseason after winning a championship, and now Giannis being traded. The disappointment for that is real. Giving credit to an opponent. It sucks. Sometimes it sucks. Sometimes your opponents come through even when your team does everything right. And once in a while you have to tip your cap. And it doesn't have to define the way that your mentality responds based on those events. So one of the major things that Jake and I changed right away when we decided we were going to do our content was to look at shortcomings as opportunities to improve. We stopped looking at things as success and failures. We were looking at like what worked and what were opportunities to improve. We also don't over-criticize failure. Spending time on, like I said, like a one-game sample size where a baseball player goes 0 for 5 with 3 strikeouts and saying, okay, you need to be benched for a week. Like, that's over-criticizing. And sometimes there's micro-criticizing, where just one small play becomes something that turns into a snowball of this is awful because of this one tiny piece of information. Being able to appreciate calculated risk. We've talked about it in baseball probably 200 times since Pat Murphy took over as the manager of the Brewers, that the plays where there's a runner on third base and they're running on contact and they get thrown out at home, it doesn't work every time. If it worked every time, everybody would do it all the time. But finding an edge in that aggressiveness is a calculated risk, and being able to learn when to do it and when not. We want to, like I said before, be able to see the possibilities in difficulty. Not to see the difficulty in every possibility. What are you focusing on? Are you focusing on the possibility, or are you focusing on the difficulty? What do you want to see? Because what you see for your teams, something you're going to see for yourself, something you're going to see for your kids, for your friends, your coworkers, whatever it may be, do you want to see possibilities or do you want to see difficulties? Looking at rebuilds. This is a very, very, very large opportunity for Jake and myself, because this is going to be essentially the first major rebuild outside of maybe the Packers, I guess, but they were kind of planning for that before we started our content. Jake and I started our show in the January of 2021. This is going to be the first major rebuild that we are seeing out of our teams. Like Badger football, sure, but the quality of that was kind of going down, so we were prepared for that. It's not something none of our teams have gone through something as important as trading Giannis in as short of a time period as it happened. Again, trading Aaron Rodgers was a big deal, but the Packers were prepared for that. There's nothing that's going to prepare you for trading a guy like Giannis. We are going through a complete rebuild with the Milwaukee Bucks. It's an opportunity. And the Bucks are going to lose games this year. But this is an opportunity, and something Jake and I are really, really looking forward to, because this Milwaukee Bucks season is going to be a massive opportunity to learn about basketball, about talent evaluation, about the development process, about what growth looks like. One thing that we've worked on, and this is definitely going to be something that's going to factor large into this year's Bucks season, is being able to attach from final scores and from box scores and be able to rely more heavily on what we're seeing and what we're perceiving, relying on that eye test. And having to rely on your eye test is a place where you need to be able to learn the ins and outs of the game that you're watching, to be able to accurately and fairly rate what you're seeing in that given game, in that opportunity of your life, in your kids, again, whatever it may be, being able to trust what you see and not just the results. Because something like, I'll just use the example of Braden Burries, if he has a game where he goes 3 for 10 from the field and you say, okay, but he took good shots or he was able to get himself into good spots, like being able to rely on what you see and what you think more than just what a statistic is telling you or what ESPN is telling you or what the Bucks record is telling you, being able to get beyond that and learn more about just the sport of basketball and what those things look like. The last big part is absolutely a crucial piece of the puzzle, and it's the victim mindset versus a growth mindset. So a quote that I really like is from Robert E. Quinn, who said, "A victim is a person who suffers loss because of the actions of others. A victim tends to believe that salvation only comes from the actions of others. They have very little choice but to whine and wait until something good happens." That is absolutely something Jake and I wanted to get out of. We did not want to sit and wait for something good to happen to rescue our thought process. We are not sitting around waiting for somebody else, one of our sports teams, to come and make us feel better. We moved out of waiting for that something good to happen. We started finding good things on our own. We want to cut through the difficulties and find the possibilities. We want to cut through a potential perceived negative outcome and be able to find those positive takeaways on what we can look at for the future and be like, hey, here's a way that this can get better. Focusing on creating that future is a present future focus versus sitting there saying this sucks right now because of what happened in the past. So just sitting around wishing that the future is going to be better, saying, well, my team lost today, I hope they win tomorrow, versus my team lost today, here's how they can win tomorrow. Sitting around constantly reaffirming a limit that you have set on yourself, on a sports team, hopefully not on your children, it means you get to keep them. When you constantly say this team isn't going to do this, your perception is always going to be that. That's why when I say about the Brewers and talking about Joe Dispenza saying that people spend 70% of their time in negative thinking, if the Brewers win a championship this year, are you going to be happy the way that you carried yourself throughout this entire season? Can you confidently say yes to that question and actually believe it? By sitting around and stubbornly defending your negative opinions and saying that you have a quote-unquote right to criticize instead of developing a growth mindset, you are sitting around saying, no, I don't want to grow. I don't want to be better. I don't want my mindset to be better. Just sitting there saying that this is never going to get better. We don't want that for ourselves. We don't want that for the people that take in our content. We don't want that for the people that are around us. We don't want that for our families. We take this really seriously for us to be saying what is optimistic and realistic. We don't want to just say, that there is only one way to think about things and it has to be from a shrinking mindset, or the only way I'm going to be happy is if the ultimate goal that everybody wants, winning it all, is the only way I'm going to be happy. We know that there are countless ways to think about sports. And we talk about 3 different sports. Sorry. Basketball, football, baseball. But we have 2 basketball teams and 2 football teams to talk about. We also take it very seriously that there's ways that we can apply the way that we think about our favorite teams to our real lives. I kind of talked about it at the beginning of the show, that Jake and I talk about the way that we do our show, the way that we've done our show for the last 4-ish years has really positively affected us as people. As parents, as significant others, as children to our parents, as co-workers, as members of society, that the way that we're doing things has positively affected us in those ways. So we would ask, would you rather be somebody who strives to find good things, or would you rather be somebody who sits back, takes them in, and whines about it? Would you rather be searching for improvements with a smile on your face, or grunting and groaning with your eyebrows pushed down? And I get that there is 100% a gray area where once in a while it'll happen where something bad happens and Jake and I are pissed, but we're still looking for those good things. Like, damn, it sucks that the Brewers lost last night on a walk-off error, but there were still good things that happened. There are still things that can be applied for the future that are good things. For me, again, another kind of example that I would give is to sit and complain about the past and never look towards the future is like driving straight while only staring at your rearview mirror. You're gonna crash eventually. Being able to focus forward while occasionally looking at the past and using that information to help you go forward, that's where you want to live. Not in constantly staring at, well, I wish that would have been different. I hope whatever happens in the future is going to rescue me from what I'm seeing in the past. I'm going to leave it on a quote from Vince Lombardi. I think as a Wisconsin sports show, it's a great way to end. And Vince Lombardi said that mental toughness is many things. Most importantly, a perfectly disciplined will that refuses to give in. It's a state of mind. You could call it character in action. We appreciate the people that follow us, the people that interact with us, the people who appreciate the way that we do what we do. When we get positive comments on our stuff and people are saying, I like the way that you guys do this, you guys give great analysis, we take that stuff to heart. We appreciate that. We also will call out people who come in with just this one piece of, I don't like the way that you said that because I think that this sucks. That's not what we want to be around. We will call that out and say, hey, if that's how you feel, are you either open to it from this perspective that, yeah, not everything's perfect, but it's good right now, or not everything's perfect, but it can be better in the future, here's how, or do you just want to continue with your shitty attitude? Because then we're not the page for you. But if you want to be able to be optimistic and realistic the way that we are, and again, we're not saying that we have the only way of doing it, but it's something that we care about, the way that we put out content and the way that we interact. So again, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening to our shows. Listen to Jake talk tomorrow, and we'll see you guys next Tuesday for our next Packers show.